Good morning. Thank you for calling Infiniti Service. Andrea speaking. How may I assist you?
Hey, good morning. I was calling for a quote on a brake job.
Uh, Wanting to replace front and rears.
Yes, please. Yep.
All right. So you're looking at $380 per axle for the brake service itself, which is the resurfacing of the rotors. If you decide to replace the rotors, it will be plus $300 per axle. So you'll be looking at $680 per axle.
So clearly paying over $1,300 for a brake job and still ending up with just OEM parts wasn't appealing to me. So I went over to R1 Concepts, who sells performance brake systems, and I picked out the best kit, which was their R1 Carbon Geomet series cross-drilled and slotted rotors with their OEM Plus pads. So this kit is advertised to be as quiet as OEM brakes, but they offer some bonuses in extra stopping power, reduced fade, and better wet performance. And using a coupon code, I was able to get this entire kit for under $500. Now I reached out to them to try to get a custom coupon code just for you guys. I haven't heard back from them, but if I do, I will obviously put it down in the description, so check it out. Okay, this isn't working out. This isn't working out, man. Alright, y'all. What's going on? Rob here, Square Wheels, back in the garage again. You asked for it, so here we are. Today I am doing a full brake job on the Infiniti Q50. Just really trying to show you guys, once again, this is another job that you can do quickly and easily by yourself with a basic set of tools. All you really need is a jack and some jack stands and a good set of wrenches, and you can do brakes in probably about an hour. So I'm going to walk you through it, and I'm going to try to break it down super simple for you. Sit tight. Alright, don't mind the dirty wheels, don't mind the dirty calipers, but what we can see here is that we've got some pretty gnarly looking scoring on the rotors. Now I'm going to start on the front wheel, mostly because it's easiest, and the reason it's easiest is because I can turn the steering wheel to really be able to get behind the caliper to loosen those bolts when I'm removing the rotor. So it's easiest, it's going to be easiest for me to show you, and then you can kind of use that to do the rear, but of course I'm going to show you how to do the rears also. It's the same concept on all four corners. So the first thing to do is jack up the vehicle, and what I did was use the jack at the jack point, and then I used my jack stand under the wheel hub after I removed the wheel. This way I've got 2 points of support throughout. Once I got the wheel secure, I went into the vehicle and I just turned the steering wheel to expose the brake pads section of the caliper. This makes it easier to access to remove the pads, and also show you guys how to remove the calipers. Zooming in a little bit, we can see that there's 2 guide pins, and the guide pins are held in by these 2 little squiggly metal push pins. They're just held in by tension, basically. So what I'm going to do is get a set of needle nose pliers and pull those pins out, and that will make it really easy to remove the guide pins. Got my pliers right here. All I'm doing is, just pulling it. There we go. Super easy, right? Same thing with the one on the bottom. Pull it. Super easy. It's just held in there with a little bit of tension. From here, it should be pretty easy to remove the guide pins. I just use a little screwdriver to push them in, or you can pull them out using the needle nose pliers from the rear of the caliper. But if you run into any issues here, just use a little brake cleaner. That should remove any of the rust or anything that's holding it in place. But as you can see, these are pretty easy to remove with just a set of pliers. Now with the guide pins removed, we can access the brake pads, and you can see that the brake pads have little eyelets on them. You can usually pull these brake pads out with,
just a set of pliers, especially if they're low. It's pretty easy to pull out. I've got a lot of meat left on these pads, it looks like. So what I did was just use a screwdriver to get in those little eyelets. Make sure you're not messing up the paint on your calipers, obviously. And you can just kind of pry them out by their little eyelets. Now, if you're just looking for a how-to on how to change your brake pads, you can jump to that chapter here. All you need to do now is just put the new pads in, so it's really easy. But I'm going to get started on removing the caliper because I need to change my rotors out also. To get these calipers off, there's really only 2 bolts that you need to focus on. It's none of these 4 on the sport brakes. These will take your calipers apart and they will spill brake fluid all over the place, so leave those alone. The ones that you want to focus on are these 2 right here. So on the top, on the very back, you can actually see where it connects it to the hub or whatever you want to call it here. That's the one you want on the top. And then on the bottom, it's that one right there. Really easy. Now this is probably the hardest part because it takes a bit of strength. I use the 7/8 inch, half-inch socket on a breaker bar to loosen them up. And then I just kind of use my hand to completely remove the bolts. Fun little tip, remember righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's a little tricky to figure out which way to turn these things if you're accessing them from a reverse position, so just make sure you're not over-tightening things instead of loosening them. Now after removing that second bolt, you'll notice that the caliper is pretty much free. So you want to make sure you secure it somewhere. You can either put it on the kind of swing arm where the wheel is, or if you're crazy like me, you can just kind of hold on to it, kind of finagle the rotor off, put the new rotor on. What you want to make sure is that you're not messing up the lines that run to the caliper, and you're not messing up the finish of your caliper either, especially if they're freshly painted like mine were. We're already reaching the end of the front brake project here, so all you really need to do is tighten up these 2 bolts. I put them on, and just kind of finger tighten them just to make sure that the caliper is secure so I could, walk around the garage freely. But yeah, you just tighten those 2 bolts and you're pretty much done. Once the caliper is in place, it's time to put the new brake pads in. Now the new brake pads are probably going to be a lot meatier than the pads that you took out, so what you're going to need to do is depress the pistons to make room for them. Now these sport brakes are 4 piston brakes, 2 pistons on each side, and what I usually do is just use the old brake pad, put it in one empty side of the caliper against the rotor, and then use a screwdriver or some sort of pry tool to push those pistons in. Make sure you're not scratching anything or puncturing anything, but you just need to give it enough tension to push the pistons in. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, see? Right, so now they're fully depressed. Now it's really easy for me to grease the new pad up and slide it in. Here it is. What I'm going to do is grab a little brake lubricant. Just put not too much, just a little bit on my finger here. And I'm going to rub it on the face of the pad, wherever metal touches metal. So where those calipers, the
pistons are touching the back of the brake pad around here. Anywhere where you think might rub and cause a squeak, that's where I'm rubbing it on liberally. So back in. Hopefully slide it in nice and easy. And give it some friendly taps to, that's one in. Now I can pull this bad boy out, push these pistons in. And then I'll be green light to get the other one out. Fresh pad. Here. That went in so nice. Amazing what a little bit will do.
So here you can either reuse the hardware that was already on your caliper, or I got new hardware from R1. But basically you're going to reverse your steps, put the securing hardware in its spot, replace the guide pins, and then on this part, make sure that you are having the little eyelet holes in the eye pin accessible after you get the guide pins in. So that's way you can put that new squiggly, screwy pin thing in that hole right where it came from. Here I am putting the tension pins into the hole, and if by mistake the hole is not accessible, you can just use a little plier to rotate the guide pin until you can see the hole and put the tension pin back in. There we have it, one good looking corner done, new brakes, new rotors, and new pads installed, so it's time to put our wheel back on.
See, I told you that was easy. So now we're just gonna do the exact same thing on the rear wheel. Just gonna lift it up, take the pads out, take the rotor off, slap on the new rotor, slap in some new pads. Bob's your uncle. Sit tight. The concept is still exactly the same. It's just a bit more challenging. So here I am, just pulling the pin again, top one, and this one I can see is turned a little bit. So I'm just turning it. Easy claps. Here's one pad. Here's the other pad. So that it just barely fits. Look it up. I got the caliper off. I'm just going to put it up here on top of the
Once we got the new rotor on the rear, it is time to put the caliper back on. And same way on the front, I just replaced those bolts and finger tightened them just enough that I could free my hands and not have to worry about the caliper falling. Once it's secured in place, I can tighten these bolts all the way, and I use the tension bar again, or the breaker bar, to make sure that they were super tight on there. Okay, now same thing on the front. I just greased up the new pads and I pushed them into the caliper. Again, make sure to depress the pistons. On the sport brakes in the rear, they are just 2 piston calipers, so it's just 1 piston on each side that you need to depress. And here I am putting the pad in, just giving it some gentle taps. That's it, y'all. Time to put the wheel on. And move on to the next corner. Now we're not quite done yet. After we've got all 4 rotors and pads installed, we need to do a procedure that's called bedding. And what this does is make sure that there's a good coating of material on your rotors so the pads can kind of mate to them and bite really well when you're braking. This is essential, and that's why you hear this squeaking here, because these brakes are not bedded yet.
So the bedding procedure, there's a million different ways to do it depending on who you talk to online. I'm just going to share how I do it. So what I do is immediately after I leave the house is get my speed up to like 45 miles an hour, and then I brake all the way down to 15 miles an hour. And I do that like 3 times, and then I try to make sure to not fully come to a full stop, because once your brakes are heated up and you come to a full stop, there is a risk of them actually not fusing, but you know, it can stick to the rotor, and eventually you'll end up in a situation where your rotors are warped, and then you've got a weird situation where you know you got weird vibrations that you're trying to troubleshoot. So here we go, up to 45 and down to 15. Up to 45, down to 15. So now I know my brakes are warmed up. I'm going to go to this long stretch of road and do the second step of bedding the brakes, which is going from 60 down to 15.
So as soon as I was done with the bedding procedure, I headed straight up to the North Georgia mountains, where I go to enjoy my vehicles. It's just mile after mile of challenging, windy roads, so there's lots of slowing down to enter corners and then power out of them. It's a really good way to break in the brakes and get a feel for them. So I'm going to do another video after 30 days of using these new brakes under different conditions, you know, mountain runs, day-to-day driving, rainy weather, and just let you know my honest opinion of them, because I don't think it's fair to give a review after, you know, just installing the brakes. So if you're interested, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments if it's something you're interested in seeing, and I will work on it. All right, thanks for checking me out. I'll catch you on the next one.
Who's that? Who's that guy?
Daddy.
That's Lucas, that's right. Oh, don't touch. Don't touch.
tickle.
A tickle?
Yeah. Eagle. 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 Eagle.
Hey y'all, Rob here, Square Wheels.
Eagle.
Yeah.